So this workshop's going to use Fiji, of course, and if you haven't updated, start the updater. Because we've pushed all the tutorials we're going to go through to Fiji, and they'll be in the script editor. So you'll get the most out of this workshop if you follow along on your machine and try and do things and play. I encourage everyone, we're going to open up lots of little script snippets, so I'll encourage everyone to play along and actually try things. But if you don't feel comfortable or you just want to watch passively, you'll still probably get something out of it. Let's see what I need to update. Oh, it's on my other screen. Big warp, that's what I got. Yes. Right. So, as you know, I'm Curtis Reedon, and Brian Northen is co-presenting this workshop with me. I'm going to kind of cover the first half, and he'll cover the second half. In the first half, I'll introduce parameterized scripting in ImageJ2. And I'll talk a bit about ops and very briefly show how you use it as a scripting user, to just give you a taste. And then after that, we'll go through 5 image processing examples, real world examples with ops and parameterized scripting, and mixing and matching with the ImageJ 1.x and ImageJ2 stuff. So I talked a little yesterday in my talk about this parameterized scripting, or parameters, and why you might want to do it. So a couple of reasons are that it'll make your code nicer, shorter, more concise, easier for other people to understand and read. But just as importantly, it's more robust, and I say write once, run anywhere. I would describe it as a nice structured way of describing what your script expects as input and what it defines as outputs, and it lets you do really cool stuff that is not possible to do without this scheme. So like as Jay just presented in his JEX talk, and you watched him dragging and dropping inputs and outputs, that kind of thing can be done programmatically now because of this new structure. And so it's really nice. It's the same thing with NIME, Self-Profiler, they all use this scheme, and IC, the protocol editor. It's a good idea. So you can take code like this. This is real world example code from ImageJ1 adapted. This is a Pythonized version of some code from the image calculator command of ImageJ. And in order to prompt the user to choose 2 images to operate on, like to add or subtract, it has to do a bunch of work kind of up front. So it has to fail if there's no images open. It has to generate or build up a list of all the titles. It has to ask the user with this generic dialog. The generic dialog was really a great innovation for standardizing these kinds of inputs, but we take it a step further with the parameterization. So finally, down here is where we're doing the work. This is the actual work of this plugin. All it does is just copy the slice labels from one image to another, so it's nothing fancy. You can see that the code is actually dominated by the setup. So parameters let you move beyond that, and you just say, well, I just need 2 images as source, and I'll produce a target. And then, these are both inputs, right? So I want to take the source image and copy the labels onto the target. So they're both inputs. And all you do is the work. Now you don't have to do any of that setup at all anymore, because the framework takes care of asking the user to specify, well, which images did you want to work on? So everybody start up your Fiji if you want to follow along. And you can open the script editor by pressing the left bracket key, which I find a little arcane, but it works. Or you can say File, New Script. For some reason, there's no bracket shortcut visible there, but it does work. Every single one of my windows will open on the wrong screen. So you should get your script editor here, and then everything we're going to be doing is in these templates. So the original purpose of these templates was to provide you with a starting point for your own work. And we kind of co-opted that to add some tutorials because you could still use them to start work as well. They're nice reminders. This will be fleshed out more in the future. Probably there'll be more numbered examples that appear in the future, and then a lot of these are the 5 real-world examples. 5, 6. I thought, okay, one of those might not, I don't know. But yeah, these are real-world examples which we might classify into an examples folder later. But all right, so to start, what did I say? I said open up templates, Python, greeting. This is a really basic example, so just give it a try. You can run it by clicking the run button. And you should see a window pop up that asks for your name. You type it in, and then you should see the greeting output. Now, you might argue that this isn't very beautiful, but I see that as a lesser issue because the good news is to make it more beautiful won't require any code changes on your part. You can write all your scripts now, and as ImageJ2 gets better and the greeting window becomes less ugly, then everybody will win, so automatically. It's a nice thing about the core. So as you can see, if you run it again, you saw my name was already in there. That's because it remembers what you typed before. So by default, all your scripts will persist the values that you specify from the time before. And there's a way to suppress that if you don't want that behavior, and I'll show you how to do that. So that's the most basic example. And as you can see, it works by having inputs to string and an output greeting. You can already see here how you start to give some hints about parameters if you care. So like, I don't need this, right? I can get rid of this label here. But if I do that, try it, right? Get rid of the parentheses and hit run again. Can anybody tell the difference? Who knows what changed? So this window says, name, Curtis. And before I made that change, the window says, please enter your name, Curtis, because that's what label does. So in ImageJ1 with generic dialog, there's a nice heuristic that you just use underscores and they turn into spaces, but this still doesn't give you full control over those labels. So if you want full control over those labels in the parameter framework, you can do it just by saying label equals. The descriptions right now I think are tooltips, but that could be changed in the future too. All right. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of the nitty-gritty things. Hopefully this isn't too tedious. If it's boring, I invite people to shout, this is boring, and then I'll just move faster. So templates, JavaScript widgets is what we want to do now. This is a more complex example. And so as you can see, we're using a different language for this one, and it doesn't matter. You just use whatever the comment scheme is for the language you're in. So in JavaScript case, it's / to annotate these parameters. The syntax is identical because it's always the @ symbol, and then the Java type, and the parens and stuff, and then the name. So that's always the same. It doesn't matter which scripting language you're working in. So as you can see, there's a lot of them here. You can try running this too, and you should see a big honkin' box. This is just intended to show off some of the different kinds of parameters that work in the script framework. So to be clear, you can use any Java type. So if you're a Java programmer and you write a new Java class and does anything, you can annotate that as a required input or output of a script. The only catch is that the system might not know how to ask the user, right? So if I make up a person object that has arms, legs, and a head, how do you ask someone to choose or define a person in the user interface? It may not be well formed, the idea. So we have built into SciJava and ImageJ2 quite a few different types that work in the UI, and that's what this widgets demo thing is. It's showing off those widgets. A widget is a UI tool for harvesting a particular type of input. So, you get all the things you might expect, all the numerical types. It doesn't matter if you use the Java class ones or the primitive ones if you're familiar with the distinction. If you don't know, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. You just decide to put the kind of number that you need, double, whatever, and you can see that all the numbers are being harvested the same way. The only difference is for double, I can type like and give that kind of number, and here if I try to do that, well, let's, okay, so does it let me do it? Nope, doesn't let me because this is an integer. It won't let you type fractions. So all these things kind of do what they're supposed to do to harvest. Booleans are just checkboxes. We support already the big integer and big decimal classes of Java, so you can support arbitrarily long numbers here, and it'll actually pass that into your script as a big integer object. We do not yet support complex in the UI. No. So adding that stuff would be very straightforward, especially complex, because it would just be too, I assume. I mean, we support matrices and then we support images. So you, so first, okay, I'll get to this in a second. Yeah, in a couple of slides. I just want to briefly mention the other things that we do support, which are, wow, this is kind of long now because I typed a massive number. Yeah.
Is there a way to tell it to ignore if you don't bother anything parameter? It keeps telling you that it wants more.
Yes, okay, so, right. Yeah, and actually I knew that would come up because when we were walking through this workshop, we ran into that as well. So that is a feature, not a bug. And the reason is you have to decide for each of your parameters, is this required, right? And so if a value is required, that's the default behavior. If you just put at whatever, it assumes that you have to have a gamma, right? You can't just run this thing with no gamma. I need to know what the gamma is. But you can also put default values. And this widget thingy that you just loaded up doesn't do that. And that's the problem that some of you might be running into if you hit run. So for me, if I hit OK right now, mine will work because mine remembered the values I typed last time. So I don't have to do that right now. But if you haven't put a file, the file is blank, it's null. And so when you go to run the script, the framework says, I can't do this script without a file, so you have to give me one. Right now, it only complains about the first thing you're missing, and we want to change it so it tells you all the things you're missing, but that's for later. So, but if you feel ambitious, you can go ahead and just type in some stuff, choose a color, choose a file. The file browser lets you select one. Okay, there you go. You can hit browse. As a brief aside, if your only input is a file, you don't get a stupid little dialog with this one widget. You actually just get the file chooser. It'll go straight to browse, basically. So it's smart. But okay, so when you run this thing, it's not intended to do anything really fancy. Ooh, you get a nice error, actually. That's fantastic. This is probably because I'm using Java 8 and I haven't tested well. In between Java 7 and Java 8, they made massive changes to how JavaScript works. So if you're a JavaScript programmer, watch out for that. We're still ironing out the kinks in ImageJ with respect to JavaScript. But you can just switch back to Java 6 or 7 if you have to. In any case, types, right? Okay, yeah, so these are the types that I just walked you through. One type that I didn't get demonstrated in the widget demo is dates. We just added that as well. So if you want to do calendar stuff, there's a date chooser. And adding these is very straightforward. Just like everything in ImageJ, they're plugins.
So if you put things in, then you cut something out, and it tells you that I need it.
Right.
It doesn't remember all the other things.
That seems like a bug. So yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'd call that a bug. Yeah, that's a good point. You could file an issue if you want to use report a bug. No, I want to fix that. So.
Is there a way to specify a default value for a parameter?
Yes, you say value equals. And so if you want to know about how this works, actually, there's ImageJ.net/scripting is part of the developer pages. And there's a big menu on the right that talks about all the scripting topics. And this next one down is called parameters right here. So this goes over all the stuff that I'm telling you. If you forget, then you can go reference this, and it talks about how to add these properties. And default values are done right now, Chris, by saying value equals as one of the things. And with that does have some caveats then, right? Because it's not really properly typed.
But you can do a default color, for example, if it's not.
You can, because so we use our SciJava converter framework, which if you remember Mark's talk with MATLAB, it's very magical actually. So a lot of things will let you convert from string.
Okay.
So I think that we have that right now, if you specified your color as like an RGB comma separated thing, that the converter just will work, and give it a try. Yeah, this is quite nice. Yes. It's available if you write in Java. So I will, that's actually 2 slides from now. So let me go through these types, and then I'll show you. Really, the answer is just you can't do it in a script right now, but you can do previews with Java code. And the Java code is actually quite similar. It still uses this parameterization. The syntax is slightly different. It's a planned feature, but no, not now. Yes, I agree that would be awesome. And same thing with like grouping them into like little like in columns. ImageJ1's generic dialog has some advantages still right now, like Wayne demoed in his presentation, grouping things, and he showed radio buttons. Yeah, so we have radio buttons as well, but you can't do grids. You can only do horizontal, vertical. But all these things are doable. And just like I said yesterday, it's a complaint-driven project. So if you say, I need grids of radio buttons, or I need 2 columns, can happen faster. All right, so those are all the types. I didn't mention images. You can use ImageJ1, Image Plus, and you can also use ImageJ2 dataset. You can use ImageLib, IMGs. Those things all work. And it says here that it's a drop-down list. That's going to be the list of whatever you have open right now in ImageJ. So it won't let you just choose a file. If you want to choose a file, you use File. If you want to choose an image, it'll choose from the available images. And this is how you might want to do there are some things you can customize in the UI, and that's what this table is intended. I'm not going to walk you through each thing on this list. This presentation is online though. If you want to check it out, it's right up here. So this is just a quick reference. If you want, if you want a multiple choice list, you can do it, and normally it'll give you a drop-down box. But if you want it with radio buttons instead, then you just say style equals. So there's this widget style thing. Another example would be if you want to harvest a password, a username password, but you don't want the password in plain text, you have to say style equals password so that it does the stars instead. And those are just hints, okay? Because in some cases it won't matter. The nice thing about this framework is you can run this from in other situations, right? So like, for example, I integrated this with Omero, and in Omero, those values are all harvested like on the command line or through a different interface. Maybe even if you run headless, you don't need your password to be in stars. That's an irrelevant thing, right? This is just for the user interface. So that's why it's the widget style. And then the last thing that's important to understand is that some parameters don't appear in that dialog box. These parameters are just filled in automatically. And this is the short table of the ones that are filled in automatically. That's also all plugin driven. So if you write a new Java type and you want to fill it somehow, you do this with what are called preprocessors, and I won't go belabor that, but there's examples in the ImageJ tutorials GitHub repo for that. But in any case, built in are images and some other ImageJ2 image data structures and overlays. We can do ImageJ1 ROIs pretty easily. We just haven't done it yet. So if you want to use ROIs as inputs, you can do that too, or we'll be able to do that soon. But the main use case is for images, and because a lot of times you'll have most common is that you have one image as input, and then some other things like numbers. And when you do that, it won't ask you to choose an image, it'll just use the active image, just like everyone's familiar with that paradigm. So just be warned about the ImageJ2 stuff. This hackathon starts tomorrow. We'll be revamping some of the data structures there. So I would encourage you to use ImageJ1's data model for your images unless you need things that it can't do, like if you need 6D or something. But if you just are doing standard stuff, ImageJ1 is fantastic. It's super robust. So stick to that and use parameters. And then you asked about what can't you do in scripts. These are the things that you can't do right now. You can't do previews and cancellation, but this is all doable right now from Java. So if you write what's called a Java command, this is a type of module, then it supports all of that stuff, including all kinds of slick. So there's another widget demo, like you saw that widget demo. There's an even bigger one that's more robust in Java in the ImageJ tutorials. You can check out if you want. It's for those who do Java. This is a great collection of Java tutorials. So this one right here has does things like callbacks. So you can have a parameter, you can do things like width, height, and then a checkbox called constrain width and height. And then if that checkbox is checked, when you change the width, the height automatically changes. You've seen this in like Photoshop and other tools. So that's all doable with callbacks. And like I said, everything here, different plugins that do the filling, that do the widgets, so on. All right, so you guys have listened long enough. Let's open some stuff up. So first, just do the 01 intro to ImageJ API. You can open all three of them if you want, but just to start off, let's do this one right here. This demonstrates some stuff that's not very exciting, but that point is not that it's exciting, and the point is just to show you kind of how it looks and how ImageJ2 is structured. So for those of you who aren't familiar at all with the design, you can think of ImageJ2 as like just a big collection of these things called services. And each service is a collection of routines that do related things. So in ImageJ1, there was one class that essentially had the lion's share of the functionality, and this is IJ. So you've probably seen IJ dot do a thing. And this is convenient because you can look through the list of what it can do, but it's less extensible. So the nice thing about the service paradigm is you can make up your own service. I can make Curtis service, and then it'll be available if I write @Curtis service Curtis, and then I can start typing Curtis.this or that. So in the interest of extensibility, service driven, yeah. Not like a system service. This is a software architecture term for, like, if you're familiar with application contexts, like the Spring library does this in Java. I'm sure there's a Python equivalent or many application context-based things, but basically SciJava Common, that library that we built ImageJ2 on, that is an application container and plugin framework, and it's all service-driven. So it's nice because you can limit which services are available to kind of use less memory or whatever, if some of them are expensive. But here are some of the basic ones that are built into SciJava, and there's just some examples here. Let's see if this actually works. Oh yeah, so I ran it, and if you look at the bottom, the last thing that it does is it uses what's called the platform service to open a URL. And so it just did that. It popped open my browser, and there's the website, right? And the stuff that's getting printed out is down here. I have 1,000 plugins. There are a bunch of menu items. So that's the very basic intro. And again, feel free to twiddle if you're bored. If I'm talking too long, you can change stuff and just sort of see what happens. All right, let's do the next one. 2. This is the thing that most people want to do. Now, this is actually less common in scripts because, like I just showed you, you put an @parameter on an image, and then you don't have to do this. If your script needs to open the image itself, then you have to do this. So if you put an @file, and what you need to do is go from having a file to having an image, for whatever reason, you just make a call into a service. This is actually the deprecated way. The new way is called dataset.io service, but it's still the same. Let me see if this works for me. Do I have any images on my desktop? Yes. I don't. Okay, cool. Thank you. It did open. It's just over here. So this is what I got. This is a screenshot that we were going to put into our workshop and ran out of time and didn't put in. So I'll just show it to you now. It's just a quick screenshot of Nime, which is one of the SciJava tools, with an ImageJ command right there. This is the ImageJ2 version of the image calculator, which is parameterized. And as you can see, the 2 parameter inputs are here, and the other inputs are right here. This is basically a straight port of ImageJ1's command or image calculator, except these commands are all plugins too, or these operations are all plugins. So it's extensible. And Nime will of course see all those extensions and can use any of them. If you're not familiar with Nime, there'll be a talk that touches on it later, Florian's keynote. So, all right. So hopefully this worked for you. Is there anybody who couldn't get this working opening images? Nobody wants to volunteer that. All right, let's go to 3. So the rest of this talk is kind of going to be predicated on the idea that you understand the parameterized scripting and, to an extent, the services in general. So you probably noticed those services were also auto-filled, right? Like it didn't ask me to choose a service because that doesn't really make sense. So these inputs are just kind of giving you access to those with names. They're like imports almost. Okay, so this script is going to introduce ops. So the rest of this talk is built on what I've just shown you, and it's going to teach you about how this ops library that we've been doing for a year and a half works. Ops are also side Java modules, so they are also parameterized inputs and outputs. But to be clear, we're not writing new ops here in this workshop. Those are written in Java. They're a little different. We're not going to teach you how to create your own ops today. What we're going to teach you how to do is use the ops library as a consumer. So like, for example, if you saw Brian's talk about Richardson-LOCI deconvolution and you want to do that by calling into ops, this workshop will show some of that. So here, this is a lot like my intro to ImageJ example. It's boring stuff, but it's basic stuff, showing you some of the fundamentals of ops. Ops is all driven by this guy called ops service. So all you have to do to tap into ops is to add this ops service ops. You don't have to call it ops. You can call it fun times if you really want to, whatever. I just like ops. So then these are the kinds of things that you can do in ops. So firstly, if you know the name of the command, the operation you want to work on, then you can ask for help on it to get a list of the available ones. So I had a slide in my keynote where I briefly showed or explained what ops is, but I want to recap really quickly. How many people here know what I mean when I say method overloading or function overloading? Excellent. Okay. So for you, that is the analogy that is closest to what's going on. Ops is function overloading functions on steroids. So you can say, when I say math.add, what that means is contextual. It depends on what I'm adding. If I'm adding 2 numbers, you'll get another number. If I'm adding 2 images, you'll get another image. And it does it pixel-wise or whatever. And so the main takeaway thing about ops from a kind of rigorous mathematical standpoint is that they have to be deterministic. They have to always produce the same results with the same inputs. So if you write your own math.add op, which extends the types of things that can be added, or you do it for performance, so you're like, I can add 2 and 2 faster than numbers in general. So you write the add 2 and 2 op, and it only works with 2 and 2. And it's just faster. If you do that, you still have to return 4. You're not allowed to return 5, because if you do that, then that will seriously break expectations, and I would call that a bug. Yeah. So far for random number generators, all of our random stuff uses seed as input. So that it kind of punts, right? Like somehow someone still has to choose a seed, but the op itself just will always give back the same number. So this makes unit testing easier too, but it doesn't actually help you. Like in your script, then you have to somehow do it. Yeah, I'm kind of torn on whether we should allow for those ops, if we should say, well, seed is optional if you don't give it, it's random, whatever. But that strikes me as a really bad precedent, I'd like to keep ops deterministic. Uh-huh. Yes, so there are a couple of things. Okay, so first of all, help will tell you if you already know a command or a particular method, then help will tell you what all different kinds of arguments you can give to it, like basically what are all of the adding ops that are available. But if you don't even know that, which is the more common case, right, then we have a lot of work to do there. What I want to do is produce a web page that's very much like ImageJ1 macro functions, but it's just like available built-in ops, and it just has a big list. It's well documented. So like I said, this is a new library, still in beta, and so for now, it makes the most sense to work from existing examples and then ask for help on the mailing list. And I'm sorry about that that things aren't, more fleshed out documentation-wise, but that's just the reality. I still wanted to show it to people because I'm really excited about it. I think it's like the future, and I would like to see more people creating ops as well. So just to show you how powerful the paradigm can be. There is one other way. I have a slide on this actually later, how to get help, because I knew that that was a huge sticking point. That's the next slide right here. Okay. So you can look at the Java docs, but of course that's nice for Java developers, but it's kind of arcane. So if you go in there and you go to, by the way, this is a web browser in a web browser. I was so excited when I made this. So if I do the op service, all the methods are built in here, and you can read about them. This is kind of unfortunately too small, so maybe I should just use my real web browser. And everything's divided into what we call namespaces, which is a really common term here. So far, by the way, namespaces are like packages in Java or similar things in pretty much every language, just to categorize things. Because we started out with only global. We were like, all ops need to have one name. So there was add. And we decided that was probably a bad idea when we ran into things like, I can't remember now. Things were different with Boolean, like bitwise and versus Boolean and. I mean, that maybe could have just been and still. But there are definitely cases where you want to separate and classify. And it was almost for answering this question of how do I know what's there? Instead of looking through a huge list of just names, you might want to say, well, what sorts of things can I do? Just like the services, right? Like I can do math things, I can do stats things, I can do things on images. And then you can, for each of those, you can look through the list. And so far, I have militantly resisted people who want nested namespaces. I hope that doesn't happen, because then you're back to where you are with packages, and it's like, well, which package do I look in? And so anyway, in here, this is how, let's see. There's a few ops that are in the global namespace. These are ones that are really general, but most of them look like this. So math, you say op.math, and then it's in here. And here, then you can look through the list of all the math ops. So for example, if what you know is I want to do some math operation, but I don't know what it's called or what the arguments are, they're all listed here, and but that's really long to browse through. So we did not want to make everyone install the Eclipse or other IDE for this workshop because it's just a higher barrier entry. But that said, I want to show you how awesome it is quickly so that you might be inspired to try it sometime. There's one thing that Eclipse can do, well, a lot of things that Eclipse can do that are awesome, but let's see. So here I have an ImageJ, and I can ask it for what are all the methods of the op service. And then bam, there they are. And now if I know I want something that starts with M, I type M, I want math, boom. And then I hit dot right here, boom, there's all the math ops, right? So Eclipse is really nice for exploring, yeah? I know. So actually, it's fortuitous timing because it was just added. It was just added last week, and only for Java, and to a limited extent for JavaScript. What's really difficult to do is to add that for all the languages. So even though I'm showing Python in this, the tool that we're using internally, it's a library called rsyntax text area, and the people behind it do a lot of great stuff, but they still haven't done this for Python. And I hope that that happens, but basically whether you get it in script editor will depend on if other people do it. Yeah, exactly. And so once that's, so that, in theory, that's working now, actually, because we did upload that. I didn't test it, so I'm not going to even try right now. But it should work. It's control space is the autocomplete key. And it works because, if you think about it, this is really complex, right? Because whatever editor you're using needs to, on the fly, essentially, well, it creates what's called an abstract syntax tree, but it's sort of like partly compiling your code. It's parsing it out and figuring out what actually is the semantic meaning of this variable and what kind of type is it and stuff. So it's not an easy problem, but people have worked a lot on it. So that's, I think, Arya, that's fantastic that you can do that, but it should be control space. Yeah, so I know Mark played with it. Maybe you guys can chat about it kind of offline. I think it's great, but I don't think it's a substitute for having that big page that tells you what are all the things. And it also won't help you if someone else wrote an op. and they added it to ImageJ with an update site, then it's there, but it doesn't actually help you find it because this thing, this ops dot whatever, won't have it built in. So the way that, well, I'll show you here. You have to say ops.run and then the name, and this name can be anything. So ops.run Curtis, but it's not built in the core. So we can only provide, we can make the core stuff really easy and then all the other stuff possible. That's what best you can do, right? So in any case, I'm not going to belabor this example anymore, but you can look through it if you want. It sort of shows off some of the things you can do with ops in a very basic level. This equation thing is sort of a toy, but it's just really fun for demoing. There's one other thing I want to nerd out about for just a second that I'm the only one who cares about, but I love it. I wrote an ASCII op. So this op takes an image and it turns it into text. So you can see here this, I generated a sinusoid and I added it to a gradient, so now it's a gradient sinusoid, and then I rendered it into text. So this is really fun if you're on a cluster or something and you can print out your images over SSH. It's actually nice for unit testing too. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian quickly. I just want to make one comment that we're now going to go through some image processing examples, so get to the good stuff of the types of things that are already in ops now, what you can do. There's not going to really be much talk about what we're adding in the future, so I just want to say right now, we're trying to add everything. Like, the goal is to make anything you can think of that's a kind of domain agnostic image processing thing, I want it in ops. And so contributions welcome. We'll be adding the things that we can as time allows. And there's 5 examples Brian's going to do, but we knew that we wouldn't get through all of it. So we're just going to do as much as we can until 12:30, and at 12:30 we'll have lunch. No stress. Any questions about the first half? No. Do you want to use your machine for the second half?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.